That's the news we're getting. It is Weimar, but dumber. Meanwhile, the world beyond Morning Joe is changing faster than any time in, well, as Chairman Xi correctly noted, about 100 years. None of these changes will make life better for your grandchildren. But since many Americans don't even know they're happening, the outcry here has been limited to a few insightful but deeply frustrated bloggers on social media. They see clearly what's happening. No one else seems to. It's driving them insane. There are still people in this country, for example, who seem to believe that the so-called climate agenda is actually about the climate or about the environment of the earth or something, and not a coordinated effort by the government of China to hobble the US and the West and take its place as the leader of the world, which of course is exactly what's going on. It's pretty obvious when you think about it, but most people don't get a chance to think about it because the propaganda is just too thick. It's unceasing, it never ends. Here's the latest on the front page of papers around the country. The head of the United Nations demanding the United States blow up its own economy, otherwise the world will end.
Humans are responsible for virtually all global heating over the last 200 years. The rate of temperature rise in the last half century is the highest in 2,000 years. Concentrations of carbon dioxide are at their highest in at least 2 million years. The climate time bomb is ticking.
So when someone who knows nothing about science, whose job it is to act as a proxy, a puppet of the Chinese government, starts wagging his finger in your face, claiming scientific expertise and telling you what to do with your economy, at the very least you should pause for a moment. And you should also remember that the United Nations has been saying pretty much the same thing since at least 1989. That's the year that the Associated Press reported that, and we're quoting, a senior UN environmental official says entire nations could be wiped off the face of the earth by rising sea levels if the global warming trend is not reversed by the year 2000. It was 34 years ago. Happy to report we're still here. So has the science changed? Well, apparently it has. Not that anyone will acknowledge that. But the shouting remains exactly the same. The AP doesn't seem to have archives it can check to find out, have we written the story before? So they just keep writing the same story. 2 days ago, they wrote this, and we're quoting, humanity still has a chance, close to the last, to prevent the worst of climate change's future harms, a top United Nations panel of scientists said Monday. But doing so requires quickly slashing nearly 2/3 of carbon pollution by 2035. Okay, Associated Press. There's even a quote from the UN Secretary General, again, not a scientist, a puppet of China, but pretty good at slogans. And we're quoting, humanity is on thin ice, and that ice is melting fast. Are they publishing the same piece and just moving the dates around? Not really, actually. Because if you read it closely, if you took a look at the UN's entire report, and actually we spent the day doing that, there are big differences in how they plan to solve global warming. This time, the plan is much more explicit. Make the West, the United States primarily, but also Western Europe, blow up its own economy, while China, the fastest growing economy in the world, doesn't have to do anything. And in fact, they're not doing anything. China is currently building, well, 2 new coal plants every week. Every week. Not good at math, but that's like 104 a year? That's a lot of coal plants. How many are we building a week? 0. Pretty weird for a country committed to fighting climate change. Well, the report says that compared to Eastern Asia, North American countries have a 33% greater obligation. How do you measure obligation? Is there a scientific scale for that? But a greater obligation, 33% more, to accelerate spending on, quote, mitigation investment flows to, quote, limit global warming. Okay, the West has an obligation. Now, if you were to go by like real numbers, you might notice that China's carbon emissions today are more than double our carbon emissions here in the United States. So we're spewing less carbon, they're spewing a lot more carbon, but we have to spend more because we have a moral obligation, because why? That's not explained. But later in the report, the United Nations does say this, quote, actions that prioritize equity, climate justice, social justice, and inclusion lead to more sustainable outcomes, co-benefits, reduce trade-offs, support transformative change, and advance climate-resilient development. Adaptation responses are immediately needed to reduce rising climate risks, especially for the most vulnerable. Equity, inclusion, and just transitions are key to progress on adaptation and deep societal ambitions for accelerated migration. That's science. Try not to use a swear word on TV, but I think we know what that is.